the days when salmon was a luxury, a fish for special occasions. Today, it's just as likely to be an everyday menu item. So how did salmon go from opulent to ordinary? And what's happening behind the scenes to feed the world's seemingly insatiable appetite? The growth of the industry is dizzying. We now consume 3 times more salmon than in the 80s, and it's here in Norway where more than half of the Atlantic salmon is produced, the country's second source of wealth after petrol. Welcome to Marine Harvest, the world's salmon empire, #1 supplier of Atlantic salmon. 381,000 tonnes each year. Turnover €3.6 billion in 2016. But last year was difficult, as was the year before.
The salmon farming industry can't produce enough salmon to answer on the global demand. The production in 2016 was reduced by 5.2% compared to 2015.
It may not look like it, but these salmon are the survivors, because today 1 in 5 fish farmed in Norway die before reaching maturity, often because of a rather tiny threat known as sea lice.
You can see a lot of large lice that is living on top of the fish, and these lice is feeding on the fish.
Inside this government-funded laboratory, scientists study the mini crustaceans that eat the salmon alive. While they've always existed in nature, extensive farming has led to a surge, and now the wild salmon are also suffering.
The rule is that the more host you have for a parasite, the more parasites there might be. Since you have more than 300 million fish in the coast, then you get a huge production of lice that can infest wild fish. We consider the farms the responsible partner for the situation on wild fish.
Fish farming only began in Norway in the 60s, but quickly exploded. Today, Marine Harvest takes us to one of the largest farms in the world, hosting nearly 3 million salmon. This morning, the team are counting the sea lice. The legal limit is 0.5 per fish. Previously, the industry used chemicals as the main weapon, but the sea lice became resistant, heralding a shift to a more natural technique known as cleaner fish.
This is a species called wrasse. So this is a cleaner fish that actually eat the sea lice of the salmon.
So we're farming cleaner fish to save the farmed salmon fish?
Yeah, and it's a natural and sustainable way to do that.
At what point do chemicals step into this process?
When we see that the cleaner fish is not enough, when the sea lice levels gets too high anyway, then we need to intervene. We see that the use of chemicals and medicine against sea lice in Norway has decreased rapidly the last 2 to 3 years.
This researcher remains unimpressed. He shows us public data revealing the quantity of chemicals bought by the industry to tackle the problem.
The dominating one is the hydrogen peroxide, 26,597 tons in 2016. And even if it's a reduction from 2015, it's still a dramatic number. If they use it as a last resort, then they are really desperate, because as you can see, the numbers are quite dramatic.
In 2016, Norway produced 60,000 tonnes less salmon than expected, its biggest reduction in 20 years. Yet, as supply goes down, the price jumps, so the industry is surviving. Still, the government is taking no risks. It wants to multiply production 5-fold by 2050, and it's launched a national program instructing producers to find a foolproof solution to the sea lice crisis, prompting a race for radical ideas. We're headed 45 kilometres off the island of Freya to an offshore platform. Now, normally in Norway, it would belong to the oil industry, but not today, because we're headed to the world's first offshore salmon farm, potentially the debut of a new era in fish farming. Built in China, this 68-metre-high structure has just welcomed 1 million salmon. In these cold, deep waters, sea lice have less chance of survival. but it also offers the opportunity to produce more, much more.
There are no limits if this is proving successful, because what we will then be able to do is that we will be opening up so much more of the oceans for sustainable fish farming. And that's something that has a huge potential in Norway, obviously, but it has a huge potential for every country that has a coastline.
And there's no stopping the industry's imagination, including this futuristic egg-shaped enclosure where the water is permanently filtered, or this 400-metre-long farm shaped like a supertanker. These super-sized projects also have to avoid another potential risk, the escape of thousands or millions of farmed fish who could then go on to breed with their wild cousins. While the parasite might be the industry's most expensive problem, it is also an ecological one, because if the sea lice factories created by farming continue to impact wild populations, it begs the question of whether the growing demand for salmon is something our society can sustain.